You know, the conversations that you want to have with folks, and I'm getting down to the nitty-gritty of what it feels like to be in these. You've got to change the feel, the look, the sound, the environment. You've got to control it all. And I don't mean that in a strategic, scientific, you need to go have a lab somewhere where you put people in a room with a two-way mirror or anything like that sort of way. You can do that if you'd like. It's going to affect your results. What I mean is you need to consider where people are talking to you and how you're talking back to them. It all comes down to tone of voice in many cases. What words you actually say to them. And a lot of times it comes down to assuring them that you're not there to sell them anything. And you got to be careful because we all want to do that. We want to double up our efforts. Well, we've got them on the phone anyway. We might as well talk to them about this new offer thing that we're thinking about. You know, you got to make sure that you build a sense of rapport. And one of the ways you're going to know that you're doing this right, if you're in a conversation and you want to practice this, you can practice this in your everyday life. Just see if you can get this far with someone in a conversation, essentially. You don't even have to be doing research for work. Is see if the person wants to leave the conversation when you want to leave the conversation. If they don't, you are probably doing this right. These conversations are so other-focused that the person who's on the other side doesn't want it to end. And most of our interviews that we schedule are 30 to 45 minutes, you know, sometimes an hour long, depending upon what our goals are and everything. And yes, customers talk to us en masse on a regular basis for that long on the phone, just about, you know, how they make financial decisions, okay? At the end of that conversation, we start to cue, you know, okay, thank you very much for your time. Oh, wait, let me tell you another story. Let me tell you about what my grandson did or what this happened here. And I've been on the phone as long as an extra half hour with some folks because they don't want to leave. That tells me that that's their true voice coming out. This isn't that veneer like the husband in the example from the diabetes story who, you know, says, well, you know, this is what I know I should say in this situation. This is them actually telling me what's really going on in their lives, okay? And that's where the good stuff happens. That's where you actually get to the themes that you can turn around. And we'll talk in just a minute about some of the things you'll listen for. But that's where you get to the themes that you'll actually be able to turn around and turn into messaging that you'll be able to put out to the audience. So what are you listening for? Here's a few key things that you sort of listen for when you go through the conversations. You want to listen for word choice. And by that, I basically mean you want to listen for how people are talking about you, the category you're in, your industry. It depends on what you're talking about as to, you know, what the word choice applies to. But people use different words based on their cultures. And I'm not talking about huge cultural differences, although you might see it if you have a nationwide audience. But in most cases, the word choice here is dealing with how they're referring to something. In that diabetes project I just gave you sort of a little snippet of, they referred to diabetes not as type 2 diabetes or anything official and medical. It was the diabetes or my blood sugar is a little high. Okay? That made all the difference in terms of messaging back to them. There were folks that would listen to a message when we said blood sugar is high as opposed to hearing the word diabetes. That's acceptance and rejection. We're going to talk a little bit more about that in a little while, how you find out which thing falls into which category. Then you deal also with the phrasing that people use. What do they put around those words? And so this involves a lot of really intent listening. You can actually record conversations, although I would recommend if you are going to videotape or you're going to audio record any sort of a conversation that you're going to have with folks, outside the legalities of that, make sure that you pad your time around that. Folks get very nervous when they realize they're on tape. And so you need to take an extra 15 minutes usually on the front end to soften them up, to get them comfortable just talking to you. Don't think you can just jump into it because that veneer gets thicker when they know that they think they're being recorded for some reason. People are very suspicious and everything. But you're looking for phrasing and those types of things. And then you're looking for things like tone and emotional spikes. And what I mean there is as you go through the conversation, and you know this from your interpersonal conversations again, you know, folks get excited about certain things. They want to tell you stories about certain things. So what you're looking for is, and you're listening for, is where are those spikes? And more importantly than almost what they say at those points in time, what did you say right before that? What was your reaction? What was your prompt that actually got that reaction? You know, we did another project for financial services, and institution wanted to run a nationwide program getting folks to open retirement accounts, essentially. And they said to us, we have a problem. Folks are not opening these retirement accounts. They're not funding them. What can we do? How can we get them to open more of these? And so we went out and we were talking to these folks on the phone in many cases because we were dealing with the nationwide audience. So these were phone interviews. You can do this in person, you can do it on the phone. There's a lot of different methodologies you can apply there. And what would happen is we'd get around the idea of what this money meant to them, essentially. And they would talk about, well, I don't really know anything about what's going on. I don't know anything about why my money is safer there than it is anywhere else. I don't know anything here. They're talking all around these different things. And then they'd get really excited around some stories. And the stories all happen around the idea of grandchildren in their particular cases, because we were talking about retirement. I want my grandchildren to be able to come visit me. I want to be able to go to the beach. I want to be able to do certain things. Very simple things, not trips to Europe, not trips, exotic skydiving trips when they're 65 years old, nothing like that. Just the basic day-to-day things that they wanted to be able to do. And the stories built, and the emotional spikes always happen around the idea of family and what that meant to this population. And so what happened when we actually turned that around later on, and we actually started to have that resonate with these folks when we turned messaging out, is we used the idea of family, and we used the idea of grandchildren. That was a theme for them. And we used those images and those words that they had said to us, how they framed their family. Okay? So we actually lifted it out of conversations that we heard repeatedly. This is how they're viewing family. We put it in our wording that actually went back to them communicatively. And we had phenomenal results with that program. We're in the 4th year of running that program right now. And year over year, what we do is we take those messaging points. Remember that quantitative data I was referring to earlier that we want to be able to tie this to? We want to enhance, not eliminate. And what we do is we take that information on the front end. We did the research. We came up with the themes. And I'm jumping ahead of myself here, but sorry, Dave. We take the research. We get the themes, essentially. And it's just too good of a story to not tell you the whole thing. And we get to that, and then we say to them, okay, we have a nationwide audience. How do we find out who has what motivations? Because everybody in this room has different motivations. You would segment very differently, okay? In this particular case, we wound up designing 4 different, it was a direct mail program. It just happened to be the virtue of how they wanted to market out to these folks. We had 4 different packages that actually went out to this population. We randomly dropped them the first year, knowing that those themes would resonate with a high percentage of that audience. So those 4 themes were going to be better than anything they'd put out there before, because we actually were talking to them in their voice. And then as the data began to come in and we started to see the actual numbers, see people opening accounts, doing different things, what we did with that information is we tied it to the existing quantitative information, and now we know who actually is opening accounts, who is funding accounts. And that's where the real resonance comes in. So the next year when we drop mail packages, they're much more strategic. They now go out tied to the quantitative information that the folks had access to. Okay? And so year over year, we've seen growth, obviously, through those types of things.